Well, welcome everybody to our talk with Potter Sue Pryke. We're going to, I'm going to chat with Sue. My name is Sarah James. I'm the director of the Craft Festival in Bobby Tracy and Cheltenham. And Kate Strasdin, Dr. Kate Strasdin is going to be co-hosting the meeting today, the Q&A today. And if you want to put in the group chat where you're from, where you've come from, if you're from far away, close by, we'd love to know where you are today. And thank you for joining us wherever you are. And let us know if you've been to the craft festivals before, or if this is a new experience for you. For us, we'd love to know where you're from. The chat box is on the side there. So do let us know. And if you have any questions, any particular questions that you want to ask Sue, what we're going to do, we're going to maybe ask those more towards the end. But if there's a question, oh, we've got the Netherlands. That's really fab. Thank you, Anne. So that's really nice. Hello. It's really nice to see people coming from all over the world. That's fantastic. Connecticut. My goodness, that's really is exciting. Great. So, and then we've got Somerset. So that's fab. I'm from Turkey in Istanbul. So it's Istanbul in Turkey, I should say. So that's really fab. So we've got people from all over the world. So without any further ado, I think Sue, Sue Pryke is an award-winning designer and maker, and most recently the new judge of the Pottery Throwdown. So welcome, Sue. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me, Sarah. It's a pleasure.
No, because I usually like to chat a little bit about how we met, because obviously we go a little bit way back really in time, because we actually started out together at Leicester Polytechnic back in, well, it would have been 1989, and you know, so that's going a long way back, isn't it?
So a long time ago, isn't it? So I went to Leicester to do my degree. I'm not from Leicester, but I've ended up coming back here and staying here and living here and having my children here. So yeah, I've lived here longer than anywhere else. But yeah, did a degree at Leicester Polytechnic, late 80s, ceramics and glass degree, and then specialised in ceramics. And yeah, and it was the kind of course that's set up to work hand in hand with industry. So there was a lot of emphasis on sort of practical business skills, as well as sort of working on industrial projects for industry. At the time, there weren't any computers, so we never learned anything like that. And by the time that I graduated, I ended up with a job at Wedgwood. And even then, as a designer at Wedgwood, there weren't any computers. Everything was hand drawn, and that was like, yeah. So
how did you get into play in the first place? Was there a bit before then? Was there a bit before Leicester Polytechnic?
So I had no ambition to work with ceramics whatsoever. I didn't know anything about clay, pottery, ceramics, tableware, anything. And I went to a secondary modern girls' school in Lincolnshire, and I was in a commercial class at the time, so I didn't do O-levels, or I was doing CSEs, and the commercial class was the ones that were going to be the typists. I learned shorthand and typing and office skills, and that was sort of where I was sort of in the streaming system. Then if you were in the next one up, then you did the what would have been O-levels. But I really enjoyed art, and I really liked English. And when I left school, I thought, I don't know what to do now. So I went to college to do my O-levels, and then graduated onto A-levels after that. So 3 years at college. And I really enjoyed English, and I enjoyed art, and then found pottery. So just probably by chance, really, I just fell into it and just thought, oh, I'll do this. I really liked it, and I really enjoyed the tutor. And I think that's been a real big key for me, that every stage of my career, right from early on, there's always been somebody that's really inspired me, and very often the tutor or the course leader is the reason I've kind of stuck at it. So I really enjoyed the tutor, and he said, you ought to do a bit more of this. So so I wrote to all the potters in Lincolnshire and said, can I have a job? When I left college after Boston College in Lincolnshire, I went to work with a local potter, just a day or so a week, just helping him out. I think he was really charitable, really. I mean, I didn't really have any skills. And again, yeah, we got on really well, and he sort of encouraged me to throw, and he was a production thrower and sort of got me to throw things all the same size and the same weight, and I really love that repetition, which has really stuck with me. I think that's why one reason why I've gone into industrial practice, because that repetition of trying to get things all the same, trying to get the same weight, the same height, and the same look of everything. You know, I really like that. So yeah, so I ended up working for a potter before I decided to go to uni. So
yeah, because obviously Leicester Poly was very much, as you said, was very much geared towards industry. Certainly at the time, I said ceramics and glass, but
yeah.
and mostly mould made. You know, there wasn't a great deal of throwing going on at Leicester that I remember. It was mostly in the all the action was in the plaster room, really.
It would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
best place to be. But actually, I don't quite remember why I chose Leicester Poly now. But I like the feel of the course, and that, you know, you kind of sometimes just go with your gut instinct, don't you? But I don't think it was the industrial practice that was of interest. I think I liked sort of the all-round facilities, and then glass was also a bit of an appeal. But it wasn't until my second year that I really got into the plaster work, and I went to Amsterdam to the Rietveld Academy on a Erasmus student exchange, and I loved it. And most of the students there were working with plaster. So I thought, oh, this looks good. What are they doing? And it was the precision that I liked. It was that clean way of working. I know plaster's really messy, but you can get sort of pristine detail on each piece, and I really liked that. And then came back and didn't really sort of work in clay the same way. I went straight into working with moulds and exploring slip casting.
Yeah, because we were part of the course, we had to do the RSA competition. The Royal Society of Art had a competition every year for one section, as it was for tableware. And in part of Leicester Poly, we were not invited to do it. That was part of the course. We had to do it, enter this competition. And you won it. You won the competition, and that started quite a significant part of your story, really.
It did, because that RSA competition, it was a national student competition, and everybody did it. Every college did it. I mean, there was one, you know, there was a question for ceramics, there was one for glass, and they were supported by the industry as well, weren't they? But furniture, textiles, everybody did the RSA. So I did this competition and I won it in my third year. And the prize, I mean, it's quite amazing, really. There was like a 6-week placement, 6-week travel bursary, and you could go anywhere you liked, and there was like a pot of money. So I did that, and there was also like a 10-week work placement at Wedgwood. So that's how I ended up going into industry. So I took went to Italy during the summer and looked at factories and artisans' workshops, and then went to Wedgwood sort of in the September. And after the 10 weeks, they took me on full time, and I had a job. And it was brilliant. I mean, there were no computers. So the process was that you drew something up on your drawing board. Actually, mine was just a wooden board balanced on some books, because they didn't have drawing boards for everybody. And you drew some sketches, showed it to your manager, and he'd say, that looks great, go and make it in the model making department, which was brilliant, because at the time, there was probably about 20 model makers at Wedgwood. Nowadays, there's probably 2. So you went and you chatted to the guys and girls up there, and they really helped you with these sort of traditional model making skills. You know, how to carve a handle, and how to turn a cup, and to actually make sort of hollow models, so it looked like, you know, a 3D object, so a prototype. And then you go back to the design studio, show it to your manager, and you go, it's a little bit small there, can you just go and do it again? So you'd spend like another 4 hours or 5 hours in the workshop with the model makers, which was just the best. You know, it's far more fun up there than it was in the design studio. So I loved it. And
is that how it would be happening now, do you think? Is that even close to what happens now, that sort of freedom?
Well, I think it's very different, because there isn't the model making department that operates in the same way. You know, there's a lot of 3D printing, and also you can render on a 3D program. So, you know, you can actually visualize shapes on the computer rather than sort of handling the material. And it's so much quicker to do it with rapid prototyping, or just do a render on the computer. So I think things have changed a lot. I mean, I still use those techniques, and there's still model makers in Stoke-on-Trent and elsewhere that use those traditional techniques, and some of those are endangered crafts. You know, they're endangered techniques. So because there's not enough people making like that anymore.
Yeah, because we both used the services of Brunswick's, didn't we? I think that I did once upon a time. I think because this the incredible skill that is in Stoke-on-Trent is unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, and Brunswick, they make a few things for me, and I would say they're the best model and mold makers in Stoke. They're extremely just precise with everything that they do. You know, the level of skill is really, really high. I mean, there's loads of mold makers in Stoke still, and I use a few of them for different reasons, and because they work with different factories, and you know, there's different reasons why you work with different model makers, but they're highly skilled, and those crafts just aren't being taught anymore. So, you know, it's a real shame. So we've got to sort of somehow support that industry and that way of working.
Yeah, because I think precision is an important word, really, isn't it, in terms of what you do? Because the slip casting, obviously, there's an essence that you can repeat things with accuracy, but the accuracy comes from the original mold itself. You know, so it's a absolute mainstay of the whole process, isn't it? I'd say. It
is. So the way that I work, I'll have an idea, I'll design it on paper, sketch it, take it to the computer, get a model shape out, you know, a drawing out, precise drawing with all the measurements, make it in plaster. If it's a handle on a cup like my new one, this little thing, you know, I'll carve that and take a mold off it, and then trial a few pieces, which is what's on my website for this crafts festival. You know, they're the pieces that I've trialed, and then when I'm happy with it, I'll take my model to the mold makers and get them to do it properly. So because they can get precision. I mean, I'm not a mold maker. It's a real skill to be able to get it precise. But if you don't get it precise, then your piece is just not going to look pristine right from the beginning. So for me, I find that it's worth the investment to get somebody that knows really what they're doing to do it properly for me right at the beginning, and then the molds last. And when after sort of 200 casts, you have to get a new mold, and then I can just go to the mold maker and just say, can you do some more for me? And they run it off really quickly. It would take me forever to make really nice, neat molds, and it's just not worth me doing it. No. So yeah,
you've worked in industry a lot throughout your career. I know you worked because I remember going to IKEA, and doing a little happy dance, when I turn it over and I see the little Sue Pryke little signature on the bottom. Because you've done a huge amount of work for that company, haven't you?
Yeah, loads. And actually, 94, I graduated from the Royal College of Art. I did an MA in ceramics, and the design director of IKEA at the time came to our degree show, and he liked what I was doing. So I started working with them pretty much as I graduated as a freelancer, and some of those first projects that I did in 94, 95, so the IKEA 365 Plus is still in production. Those soft square plates, they're still there. And I did a big plastics range for them a few years later, like the colander, the oval grater with the different lids, I designed that. But there's a whole range of plastics that I did that some pieces are still in production. So yeah, I'm still in touch with them. I don't do huge amounts, but I do a project every now and again. And it's a lovely company to work for. They really respect design and designers. And it's a different way of working, I think, than we have here. I think design is really valued. Not saying it's not necessarily valued here, but it's just, I don't know, it's sort of a different way of working. They give you sort of a longer lead time. They have a long lead time because it's massive production. So yeah, sort of more of a free rein. They'll perhaps, but also very tight in terms of project guidelines, because you're working to a price very often. So, you've got to design that in, that's part of the concept. So it's a great company to work for.
Then you've worked with other high street brands as well as you've gone along with. But in recent years, I think your own personal practice has taken more of a prominence in what you do. I think.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a long time to slip cast things and make things. So coming back into my studio and making was kind of I suppose I had this yearn to sort of move out of industry, because I was working full time for Sainsbury's and then Next. And I just wanted to make my own things. So, and I think, and it just took over. I mean, it was sort of initially, it was an idea to sort of fill some gaps, but then, it's all encompassing, and, it just takes over. So, and I think that's my passion, actually, making. And I love doing a bit of design work on the side, and it seems to be a good balance for me. Yeah.
Because you've been doing, you've been really highly complimentary about the craft festival on your.
I love it.
It's really great. I'm glad. Well, I'm so pleased. It is a great platform to sell work, and still have and lots of different things that happen there as well. We can still enjoy and have good fun times, but it's still got a serious sort of retail element to it and selling really meaningful work, you know. And I'm just so pleased that you're such a champion of it.
What I really love is that, I mean, it reminds me of some of the fairs that I used to go to with my mum when I was a sort of teenager, you know, art in action. It's got that vibe to it, you know, that energy and that excitement. There's lots going on. There's lots of demonstrations, lots of fantastic makers. But, you know, what really makes it is that that you think about us as the exhibitors. You know, there's yoga at 8 o'clock, and you know, on the bank of the river in the morning before the show opens. There's your Kaylee in the evening, and we have like a visitor, an exhibitor private view as well, don't we? So we can go and have a look at everybody's work, have a glass of wine and a tour around whilst the show's closed to the public. So I just think it's those little things, and obviously we campers as exhibitors, and it's like being on holiday with a bit of work thrown in.
I know. Look, like, I usually employ half your family. Usually they're doing something, aren't they? They're like
all along. So it's great, and the visitor numbers are brilliant. The sales are really good, and it's great just to spend that time with the other exhibitors. You know, we've made some really, really good friends at the show. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, well, it's been quite an interesting process, sort of trying to create this sort of element of an event online, and it's obviously it's not quite the same, but it's an interesting way to try and get people, and this is a bit important part of it, of getting our audience that normally would come to the show, so they can actually get to reach out and you know, get involved in even if it's from the sitting room, you know. It's been a bit of a funny one, really.
No,
but in terms of your own practice, you actually do work with your husband as well on projects as well, don't you?
Yeah, so when so John, his company's Wild and Wood, and he makes things in concrete and oak, but sort of 6-7 years, it's probably 8 or 10 years ago now, I lose track of time, we decided that we'd sort of tweak our businesses. He changed direction with his, and I came back to making after working in house. And we thought, well, let's do something together. And all of our friends had said, I don't know why you two don't work together. And it's like, why would I want to work with him? We don't want to spend too much time with each other, do we? So we just thought, that makes sense, actually. So John wanted to work in oak and concrete pieces. So right at the beginning, I designed a range of ceramic shapes, and then he'd sort of do an oak lid that went on a little pot, or he'd make a oak plate that went with, you know, a ceramic plate that was the same shape. So some of the shapes are exactly the same. And like my teapot with the oak handle, he designs and makes that handle still, so it's steam bent oak, and he'll produce those for me. So we've still got sort of a synergy between what we do, and although he's working more in concrete now than oak, you know, he's got a vase which he calls his Susie vase, just because he's pinched it from me. You know, it's the same shape as one of my vases, and he just took them all from it. So, you know, there's things that work really well, and, you know, and we work hand in hand like that. And it just works really nicely because we can do the shows together. You know, some pieces we've worked on collaboratively, and our ranges sit really nicely with each other. So it's a good combination. And I don't mind spending that much time with him at the end of the day. He's quite nice.
He's all right, isn't he?
He's all right.
Well, we can't not mention the pottery programme, because I think that's been it's a huge success as a programme, and you've been a big part of that. I'd love to know a bit more about how you got involved with the programme.
It's a brilliant programme, isn't it? So I was lucky enough just to be on the shortlist. So the previous judge, she couldn't do it any longer. I think she just got really busy. So they were on the scout for somebody to fill her shoes, and they did lots of research. They had a big list of designers and makers, people that were in the ceramics world, that would be, you know, a good a good judge. So I was just on a shortlist, and Keith, I've known Keith for a long time because we used to do the trade fairs together, and you get to know people when you're at these events for a few days. So he had my phone number, and he rang me and he said, your name's on a list for a potential judge. What do you reckon then? You know, I said, what do I want to do that for? I don't want to go on the telly. He said, you'll be great. Come on, come and have a look at what we do. And I said, oh, I don't know. And he said, well, can I give your phone number to Sarah, the director, so that she can talk you into it, basically. So anyway, had a chat with Sarah, who was really lovely, and then went to have a screen test in London. And it was a small group, a small team that I met up with, and they were all just really nice, ordinary people. So thought, this isn't too bad, is it? And just sitting me and Keith down talking about pots, you know, that's what you do. It just rolls up off the tongue, doesn't it? So, you know, what wasn't to like, really. And we had such a fabulous time filming. It's a brilliant program, and actually it's, you know, it's really promoting ceramics in a very positive light. So, you know, there's no reason not to do it. And, you know, I think it's been a real asset to ceramics, because we don't teach ceramics in schools anymore. So how are people going to know about it? So
well, exactly. I wonder how many people are listening today, if they're have they watched the program, because it's so positive. And
yeah.
I thought the series had taken a really good, a broader look at ceramics as well, and especially bringing in more industrial techniques and some more very, you know, some of the more, well, they obviously very, very traditional, some of the layerings and some of the different techniques, and bringing in the actual makers in alongside. And I thought that was a really good way to show again about how the person, you know, behind all these incredible objects, isn't it? You know,
and it was lovely to see that technique, the paper transfer printing that they have at Burley.
That was genius.
That's the only factory in the world that's doing that, you know, in full production. So it's amazing to sort of realise that there's still these old traditional techniques that well are struggling. I was going to say striving, but thriving, but they are struggling, really. So it just sort of opens your eyes to actually the different techniques that are out there with, you know, with ceramics. It's there's a multitude, isn't there, that we're probably unaware of. So it's done a good job in highlighting those.
Well, I think Stoke as well is like one of these incredible towns where it's teeming with people with unbelievably high skills, but they are like, what can I say, the most down to earth everyday people you'll ever meet. They don't particularly consider them to be, certainly don't consider themselves to be artists in any way, but the skill that those ladies just whack those transfers on, like, is like, I mean, the incredible amount of hours that obviously it's taken them to get to that, but they don't bat an eyelid, are they, but doing those. And when you start doing it yourself, it's like an absolute nightmare, isn't it? You just think, how on earth are they just bang, 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 you know?
But it's like anything, isn't it? And anything that's in production as well, to do with production, you know, the more you do it, the more second nature it becomes. And it's those haptic skills, you know, that ability to just get on with something. Your mind's elsewhere. You know, it's that sort of, people call it therapeutic and meditative, because your mind is elsewhere. You know, think about what's for tea, or that book that you're reading, or film, or whatever. And your hands are just doing. You know, they're doing those skilled jobs, and it just becomes second nature. You know, that's one thing that I really love about the way that I work. That, you know, I can put the radio on, be fettling and finishing a pot off, you know, rows and rows of things just in front of me, mind of my own, listening to what's going on the radio, and it just takes over, and you just do it. It becomes second nature.
Well, it's quite interesting. Some of the comments that are coming up in this chat, which I don't think you can see, is saying that when the show is on, when Great Pottery Throwdown is on, the classes all fill up. There's obviously a few people that are coming on that teach pottery, all their classes fill up. And I know from pot plays, there's sales of clay and wheels and things go through the roof. So it's really good to know that has such a positive effect. And as you say, you know, there's not so much going to school. So we did have a comment saying that people are doing, you know, there is some in the schools, but as a rule, it has been in decline, hasn't it? Really, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be like with woodwork and needlework in school. You know, that they were things that, well, it was boys doing the woodwork, wasn't it? Well, it was in my school, and then the girls were doing, you know, all the sewing and needlework and all the home economics. I mean, that was sort of a standard part of the curriculum, and yeah, and it's not necessarily there anymore, which is a shame. And all of those things, which are creative parts of life that we should all be doing.
So I think we've got one of the when Richard Parker, I think he was on the second series. He's coming to say hello. Actually, sorry, just had to stop because he's just saying. I was thinking, Jen, oh, there you are, because I can't see. Not everyone's got their cameras on.
No,
so
yeah, I can't see him. But hello.
No, never mind. No, but it's but I know that the next series was going to start, isn't it? Well, they were looking for people. Is that so? Obviously, things must be so challenging now to try and get the program together for the next series.
Yeah, so the deadline was May, early May, I think, for people to apply to be on the next show, all the potters. So they're currently going through them and shortlisting. So I think they're setting them challenges. I mean, I don't know exactly how they're doing it, but it's all online. It has to be sort of obviously socially distanced. So I think that's still going ahead, but obviously we haven't got dates for filming because it should have been June, I think. But now we don't know what's going to happen in terms of sort of rules and regulations of distancing, etc. So yeah, but apparently it's going ahead, but I don't know much more because I don't think
we look forward to that. That'll be something to look forward to because it's a great programme to watch. But going back to your work, I just wanted to talk a little about the process that you go through to actually start creating or developing a range. Is it something, because I know that you brought out some pieces of beautiful black pieces out on the, are those behind you there? Are those new?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's new. So I've been wanting to do a few new shapes, especially a smaller teapot for a while. And I love creamware, so traditional sort of 18th century creamware, where there's lots and lots of detail, sort of carved handles that are sort of inspired by sort of foliage and sort of fabrics that have been twisted and plaited, you know, really ornate over the top. So going to somewhere like the V&A, for instance, or even like the Stoke Museum is heaven because there's so much detail in all of these wonderful pieces. So I thought, well, I want to try and capture some of that, but that's sort of, so that's what I was showing you earlier. So that's sort of my new handle that's sort of a nod to this creamware. But I guess I'm trying to sort of pare back all of that detail and place it in sort of a contemporary context. So just sort of paring back the shape and keeping it very simple and taking some of those extra lines out of the handle. I think that's, yeah, that's sort of the way that I've been working. So sometimes it's
quite highly decorative for you, though.
Well, sometimes it's sort of innate and it's in there, it's in the ether. You know, when you develop something new, you're sort of drawing on things that you've been storing, you know, like a vocabulary you've been building for a while. So, and other times it's sort of more forced and you sort of go and do a bit of research and go down that route. So so it's sort of a bit of each. So the colorways, I guess the black, I've always liked sort of black basalt, and because I've worked at Wedgwood, you know, that still sits there as something that I'm really fond of, because one of my first pieces that I designed ever and got into production was a little jasper trinket box, and I just think that those, you know, that sort of fed into sort of who I am and sort of is part of me. So, you know,
those for about the 50th time. Hello.
I've got one here. Hold it in.
I was like, I've been trying to do, look at the Sorry,
so
yeah.
Something like that that's sort of matte on the outside and then a glaze on the inside is, you know, trying to keep it contemporary, but, you know, just to a nod of something that I'm interested in. So there's a teapot in the collection. There's two or three different cup shapes. Yeah, and there's some dinner plates that have been bubbling away for a while that I wanted to do something that you can just stick in the kiln. You don't have to worry about setters and don't have to worry about keeping them round, because trying to fire anything high out of porcelain, it's going to warp. And I just thought sometimes when things come out and they're warped, they're quite beautiful. But if you sort of set out with the intention of doing something that's round and pristine and it's slightly wonky, it shows up immediately. And people go, oh, there's a knock in that. There's, you know, it's warped. I don't like it. But actually, if you do something that's a bit gentler and is purposefully sort of nudged a little bit or fettled in a slightly different way, or just, you know, allowing some of those natural qualities of a clay that's being fired high to come out, then they're quite beautiful. So I've got this other tableware range that's some of it is unglazed and it's highly in its polish, so it's got a really, you know, sort of stone-like quality to it, and other pieces are glazed. But the idea is that they, you know, they're sort of a bit more natural and organic, and sort of they've got their own pathway, they follow their own intention. Yeah, so that's
but you sell your work in lots of different places as well, don't you? I mean, you've worked a lot with big retailers as well, I think, over in terms not in terms of designing, but actually selling your own work too.
I do a couple of trade fairs every year, so get to meet all of the retailers from all over. Actually, it's not just UK based, it's international. So in the UK, lots of independent retailers. The Conran shop, they also have a collection from me. Dalesford Organic, I sell to them. So there's some bigger retailers in there, bigger galleries as well, like Yorkshire Sculpture Park. I sell quite well with them. They've had work from me for the last few years. And then international, I mean, not many, but sort of in the States and Australia, fairly wide in Europe. Yeah, so yeah, quite a broad range of retailers, which is quite nice because it's, you know, it's sort of reaching further than you can sort of when you sell directly to the public. It's different. It's great coming to the craft fairs and meeting the people that buy your work, but it's also great to sort of be able to supply shops all over.
Well, it's important to have that broad range of ways that you present your work as well, isn't it? I think that's really, and also, of course, now online is very important.
Yeah, and actually, I did, as soon as we hit coronavirus, I suppose like every maker, it's like, oh, what's going to happen now? I've got orders that are sitting here ready to go out their box, but nobody's paid for them. I've got orders that I've sent out that nobody's paid. I've obviously had orders that are cancelled. And it's like, well, where's the money going to come from? And actually, people have been brilliant because they have been supporting me online. So sales have been quite buoyant, which is great. You know, I really appreciate that. Yeah. So yeah, but you know, this is the way forward. I think we're all getting used to buying things online now, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you've already got a shop, I think this Digital Craft Festival galvanised quite a few people's realisation that they needed to maybe have a think at seriously selling online. Because this is going to last a little while longer, especially some of the bigger shows. It's going to be hard to go to. But I do have a question from the audience, if you don't mind me asking this, Sue. What criteria do you use to choose for the final selection of candidates for the show? Do you get involved with that part? With the potty program? I
don't get involved. I'm a judge, so I can't have anything to do with that at all.
Yeah.
So I can't answer your question. So,
I think they're looking at sort of skill level. Are they looking for? I don't think they're looking for the complete, you know, like they don't want professional makers, do they? They're not looking. They're looking for people to develop, aren't they?
The criteria that they've put online for when you apply is they want people that are home potters, so they're not making a living from it. You know, that is the basic criteria. So some of the potters, like Claire, for instance, she'd done a degree. You know, she's a good thrower. And I think, well, Matt's a good thrower too, but I don't think he'd done a degree. So there's varying levels.
Because Jacob was very good, wasn't he? Jacob was particularly good.
Yeah, I think he'd done a degree as well. So, you know, you can have gone through sort of formal education, but you've got to be working as a home potter and not actually selling your work, you know, to full time, to be, you know, self-employed doing that practice.
So they're looking at this. So the way there certainly was a high for an amateur show. It is quite a high level, but I think the Rosa who won, she definitely improved massively throughout the process.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you gave Matt and Jacob and Claire throwing tasks, you know, they were way ahead. And they were really confident and very comfortable in that with that project. But give them slip casting, give them some figurative work.
I know.
We're really strong with that.
Yeah. Matt had to go and have a little walk, didn't he? Had to go off a little.
He really struggled. Yeah, but then somebody like Rosa excelled, and Rosalind, anything to do with you know, that figurative, or you know, working sort of with their hands in a smaller way, you know, working in a hand building processes, you know, they were far more confident. So it just shows you, doesn't it? And nobody had done any of that tissue paper printing. So, you know, lots of things are thrown in to challenge the potters, which is all part of the makeup of the show.
I mean, hand building a toilet, I mean, for goodness sake, I could not believe. It's like, what are they doing? Yeah. No, it was brilliant, and I loved it. And it was absolutely brilliant to see you there every week as well. You know, it was a little jump for joy again to see someone that, you know, doing so well. It's fantastic. I wondered if anyone has got many questions that they'd like to ask Sue, as we're going to sort of start to wind down the questions at the moment. So if you've got any questions now is the time to put them in the chat facility, and do let us know if you actually want to ask the question yourself. I'll come and find you and unmute you, and you can ask the question yourself. But in terms of during lockdown then, Sue, how has that been for you as a person and a family?
Well, it's been great because there's 6 of us in our house, so it's been great that the children, well, children, they're not children. My youngest is 15, so you know, it's been great that they've been at home. And my eldest daughter, she's been travelling for 2 years in Australia, so fortunate that she was home. So that was really nice that we were all there together, and just spending that time with the family has been great, and having time to sort of go out for walks with John and going for runs with him, which, you know, usually it's like, I'm too busy for that, I've got to get into the workshop.
Yeah.
So that's been quite nice that, you know, that slow pace has been appreciated by all of us. I mean, the kids, especially Evie, the youngest one, she, well, when we go to the craft festival, she helps to clear the tables, doesn't she, in the food area. So, but for her, I mean, she's following sort of what teenagers want to do. She gets out of bed at midday and stays up until God knows what time, but she's, you know, chatting to her friends all the time. But, you know, so it's been interesting to see how we've all fallen into different patterns. So
it sounds very similar to our house, to be honest with you, Sue, that I've been getting up and doing sort of exercise, doing stuff that I thought I didn't have time to do before. Going, I have got time now. No, not so much lately. This show took over my life in a big way. I quite appreciate how intense it was going to be, but it's all, you know, that's another story.
Yeah.
But again, the teenagers, one of them particularly, my daughter, I don't see her much before she's probably listening now. Whoop, don't say too much. They help in lots of ways, but it's late to bed, late to get up, I think, really. But you're all quite, you know, you've managed to do some work then during this period, or has it mostly been the sort of...
Well, initially I was like, oh, this is great, you know, I don't have to do anything. But then I felt that the pressure was there because there's so many free events. People have been very generous with their time. So, you know, the design trusts, I've done seminar workshops with them. There's just so many things to participating every day. I mean, even just things like doing marks, qigong or yoga in the mornings, you know, doing an hour of that. You know, the day just gets full up, doesn't it? But there's been loads of sort of business things to do. I mean, even like the DIT, they've laid on loads of free seminars and workshops to do with business, to do with marketing. So, you know, I've been jumping on a few of those. And then gradually as shops started to open, so I've got some shops that are in the Netherlands, for instance, that opened ages ago. So they're like, well, can we have some more work? And like, oh, I better get in the workshop then. And now, you know, shops, so the independents shops are open now, aren't they? So, you know, the shop's waiting for orders. So I'm pretty much back to normal now. But, you know, I quite enjoyed having a bit of quiet time and no traffic on the roads, you know, just having it so much quieter, you know, not that background hum of traffic, because I'm right in the Midlands, in, you know, not far from the M1, and you can hear it, so especially on a cool day, you know, when the air pressure is higher. So yeah,
there's a couple of questions come in. So do you still throw?
No, I haven't thrown for a long time. And actually I've still got a wheel which I bought when I was about 18 from a potter, and but I changed it into a whirler a long time ago. So I've put a plaster wheel head on it. So if I want to make molds and models, then I use the whirler. It's not a wheel anymore, it's called a whirler. Yeah.
So, and someone's asking, how would you recommend trying to transition from home potter to professional ceramic designer? Are there any specific avenues to take?
Well, I suppose it's down to that 10,000 hours, isn't it? You just need to keep practicing and put the hours in, and talk to Sarah James about what exhibitions are coming up. So, I mean, there's lots of really nice craft fairs to get involved with to sell your work. But I think it is just down to practice and things like this, you know, things like Instagram, for instance. You can very quickly build a community of support around you and meet some really lovely people that are always there to offer advice and friendship. So I think it's sort of just getting involved and finding out what's available, what suits.
I'd add getting really good pictures of what you do. I think that's the, you know, you are the master of getting great pictures.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I just take that for granted nowadays, but absolutely, you've got to have a really good photograph of your work. And actually, you see a lot of really bad work that's photographed beautifully. So, you know, just make sure that your quality's there, but also the quality of your work, but the quality of your photography's got to be there as well, because, you know, if people are shopping online, they can't go and pick your work up and feel it and, you know, see the size of it, etc., and see the quality of it. So you've got to get all of that into photography. And there's some great photographers out there. So
Yeah, you work with Yeshin, don't you? He's a great photographer he's based in London, is that right?
yeah, he's London, and actually, when he started in photography, I just started, you know, when I just started making again. So I found him quite early on. So we've worked together for, you know, quite a few years now. And actually, during lockdown, I just send him. I've done it twice now. I've sent him like a couple of boxes of pieces and just said, "Can you just have a couple of hours shooting these for me?" Being quite prescriptive about what I want, and yeah, he sends me some great photos back. So that seems to work well.
Well, so we've got another question. Could you share ideas about why handmade work and pottery is so important in these times when we're so used to getting things industrially made? Good
Well,
question.
I think we like that connection to the maker, don't we? You know, I mean, I have worked in industry. I have worked with, you know, Sainsbury's, for instance, is a good example. Their homeware section is looking amazing. I don't think it's looked as good before. It's really, really fantastic. But we all know that their lovely, you know, Cornish design range, for instance, isn't made in Cornwall. But, you know, we buy it because it looks really lovely and because the price point. But you go to a maker because you want to buy into that way of living, you know, that life. You want a little bit of that maker, don't you? You know, that all the energy and the excitement and the inspiration that goes into these pieces that are made by hand. You know, you want to buy a little bit of that Cornwall or Devon or wherever the maker is. You know, and support the maker as well. That's really important. So and you don't get the same level of finish in a factory because things are made in a machine. So, you know, it's the hand of the maker at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's about that personal connection, isn't it? That's the essence, really, of why people buy craft, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, and actually, although I work in a very industrial way, you know, things are made in a mould, so each piece should theoretically be exactly the same because it's the same shape in the mould and the forms are repeated. But actually, I'm sitting there with my sponge, you know, going over the edge, and I'm listening to the radio. My mind's elsewhere, and so the edges aren't exactly the same. You know, it's not going through a machine that's getting them all exactly the same and pristine. There might be a little wobble there. I tried to get it flat, but you know, you can't do that by hand. Well, I can't.
No, but I think this will be, well, it's the last question, but I think it's probably directed at both of us in a way. He says, do you think people might be reluctant or wary to go to events or fairs past COVID? It's not an easy, it's an impossible question to answer, I think, to be honest.
I think we'd all like to know the answer to that. Well, I don't know. I've got friends that are just going to jump on a plane in a couple of weeks and go off on holiday. I mean, I don't want to do that, but yeah, we need to move forward at the same time, though, don't we? You know, we need to get business up and running again. We're all aware of that.
Yeah,
so
I think there'll be. I think when they're safe to do so, I think people will. They'll only be safe to be able to put them on when they're. When it's time, when the time is right. It's not quite yet. It's certainly not. It's not soon. But at the same time, I'm hopeful that, you know, as we go along, as we get better, at tracking and tracing and things like that, that things will start to level out. But we have, and then we have, as I say, there is a vaccine in production. So I think we've got to stay hopeful, got to stay positive about it. And I'm sort of thinking, maybe at the end of the year.
Yeah, all the shows that I've booked up to do, even the ones in November, like Leicester, for instance, and Great Northern. I mean, they're October, November. They're all cancelled. Yeah. So you know, it's not going to be a short-term fix, is it? Like you say,
we've got one penciled in for end of November in Bath, which is a new show. But you know, I'm keeping a very open mind about that at the moment. I think it's it'll definitely happen next year.
yeah. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Well, I'd just say thanks very much to everyone who's joined us today. Sue, it's been an absolute pleasure as usual to talk to you about your life and your work. And again, we've got a film by Sue. If you're Sue is got one of her film of her demonstrating. So if you go to the demonstrations tab on the website, you can click on the demo tab and you can actually see Sue in action making some of her work. And also you're chatting as well in the versatility of clay film that we made actually together with 4 or 5 other potters talking about their work. So there's a lot of Sue, and I think you're probably doing a live with us. Are you doing live on Instagram at all? I don't know.
Is it tomorrow at 1, 11?
Yeah.
1?
So I think it's probably with me again. So it might be with
You'll be
with
fed
Kate.
up with me.
No, I think it's actually with Kate. No, it's with Kate.
Oh, with Kate. Yeah.
So you'll have a different perspective but instead of asking you about when we were at college together.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you ever so much, everyone, for joining us today for the Master Maker Q&A with Sue Pryke. And hope you enjoy the digital festival. Go and have a little look around. Go and look at Sue's website. Go and look at all the makers' websites. And thank you so much. This film will be available on YouTube to watch again in a few days' time when we've messed about with it a bit. And so thank you so much for joining us. And thank you very much, Sue. Goodbye.
Thank you.